So I've been getting a lot of comments from people on my Oolong build video saying how this element is better than the ones that I'm using, how that element makes more sense for these types of builds. I totally understand. We all have our own preferences, and the good thing is that you can modify my builds in whichever way you prefer to suit your playstyle. But I was also thinking, how about I make a build where you can use all 5 elements in the game? That sounds fun, right? Well, you are welcome, because that's what this video is going to be about. Now, one thing I'll say is that, of course, if you are sticking to only 2 elements, like in my last build, it will be a lot stronger than this one. But compared to that, this one is way more fun to play with, as it allows you to have access to all the different elements without you needing to change your build. Alright then, let's jump right into the build. Now, there are 2 ways to make this build. You can either focus more on melee damage, or you can go for spirit damage. And of course, because I don't like meta builds, I'll go with the spirit damage route instead, because melee is too OP in this game. Alright, enough with the jokes. So first thing you're gonna need for this build is going to be a ranged weapon with the set bonus requirement mitigation. And you really need it on your ranged weapon. And why so? We're going to talk about it in just a little bit. But before that, the set I'm using for this build is going to be the Tyrant Overlord set. So the first bonus we get from this is going to be HP increased by 11, then power drop on enemy when you're landing a fatal strike on them, then HP restoration from melee attack damage, and the last and the most important one is going to be spirit damage to enemies afflicted with negative effects, and the damage increased by 9.5%. And because in this build you have access to all 5 elements that you can use whenever you want, so in combat the enemies are going to be affected by at least one negative effect. Now back to what I was talking about, why you need the set bonus requirement mitigation on your ranged weapon. You can also get this thing on your melee weapon. For accessories, they don't roll with this. So if you look at this set, the set bonuses, to complete this set, you also need this weapon called Triumphant Conquest. Now I'm pretty sure I have it saved as favorite. Let me check. This is the one, right? So as you can see, this is not a fast-hitting weapon at all. It's really slow, and I have talked about in my previous build videos that if you are going for a status effect accumulation build, the best weapons to go for are going to be the weapons that you can hit enemies really fast with. So those are going to be dual swords, then staff, and there are a few other weapons that can do the job. But if you're using something like, let's say, axe or hammer, then because those weapons they deal a lot more damage in one hit than these weapons do, but the problem is they don't hit nearly as fast. But because status effect accumulation depends on how many times you are hitting the enemies instead of how much damage you are dealing to the enemy, therefore fast hitting weapons are the best option for these types of builds. So whatever weapon you want to go with, be sure it's not a slow weapon. So the spells I'm using for this build, the first and most important one is going to be Elemental Plague, which increases the status effect build-up on enemies significantly. And then the next one's going to be Lightning Weapon. The second one, or the second imbuement, going to be Ice Weapon, and the third one is going to be Flame Weapon. And for the rest of the 2 elements, which are going to be Toxin and Stone, well, we are using enchantment on our melee weapons for those 2 elements. Now, these are not random, that I just randomly pick these 3 imbuements, and the rest of the 2 I can just put it on my melee weapons. So whichever weapon you are using, you don't have to use dual swords as I am in this build. But look at whatever weapon you are using, look at which 3 virtues they scale with. For me, the dual sword scale with wood has a B+ scaling with wood, D+ scaling with flame, and A scaling with water. So to get the most amount of damage from this weapon, you will have at least, you should have at least 12 points invested into those 3 virtues. And because the lightning weapon, frost weapon, and flame weapon, so for the lightning weapon you need to have 12 points in wood. For the ice weapon, you need 12 points in water, and for the flame weapon, you need 12 points in fire virtue. That's the reason I decided to use these 3 imbuements instead of anything else. And the rest of the 2, the elements, the virtues that you need to have 12 points in to be able to use the imbuements for these 2 elements. Our weapons don't scale with them. Well, this one does, but the reason I picked it up for is because, when you are in combat, so this is the thing. I could use 2 bronze dual swords and have the same scaling, and it would have maximized the amount of damage I would be getting from from this build. But the problem is that I was running into is that I couldn't keep track of which weapon has which enchantment. So I decided that I'm not going to use two weapons that look almost identical to each other. Therefore, I picked this one up, but the scaling is a little bit different on this one, but we made up for that with this passive, which is going to be melee attack power increased by 19. So you can see this one has B plus scaling with Earth Virtue, but still it only is 4 points lower in damage compared to this one. And that's the reason I have the melee attack power increased by plus 19 passive on this weapon for. Alright, so if you have any questions regarding what I just talked about, then feel free to let me know in the comments or ask me. I'll try to answer it for you. Now, to use this build, what you're gonna do is hit with your whatever weapon you have equipped. Be sure to cast your Elemental Plague spell before that, just so you can do the build up really, really fast. And then you start using these elemental, like the imbuement spells, and then you switch to the other weapon, which is going to be this one, which we have the stone enchantment on. Now, something you might not know, that I think a lot of people switch their weapons like this. So they do the combo and then stop their combo, and then, okay, I'm just going to switch to my dual swords. Well, that's not the only way to switch your weapon. So you can, so if you are on a PlayStation controller, you can press RB and then the circle button, and it instantly switches, and you do not have to stop your combo in the middle, as you can see. And if you're on Xbox, that's the circle is going to be B. So as you can see, I can just keep doing the combo without needing to stop doing it. All right, good enough. In case you didn't know, now you do. Now into what passives or special effects to stack on your gear. So let's start with the weapons. So with the Toxin Enchantment, we talked about it. The Spirit Gain plus 2.9%. Then Enemy Status Effect Accumulation, really, really important. Increased by 5.7%. Now this one affects all 5, the accumulation for all 5 elements. And then we also have Spell Duration increased by 5.7%. This one, we just talked about the melee attack power, and the other ones are just the same. Now on to the set items. So the passives, or the special effects, I'm stacking. Spirit damage to enemies with negative effects increased by 3.7%. A negative effect duration increased by 2.8%. Then heaviness and poison accumulation. Well, there's the reason why I went with the accumulation increase for these two elements. Now, I talked about this in my last video. Is that the build-up with these imbuement spells is going to be really, really, like significantly faster compared to what you get from these enchantment on your weapons. Therefore, because we already have fast accumulation for these 3 elements, that's the reason I decided to go with the accumulation increase for the 2 elements that I'm not using a wizardry spell for. Alright, so as you can see, I have the same accumulation increase on all of my gears. Now the rest of them, Spirit Gain from normal attacks, and what else we have, let's see. Also have Spirit Vulnerability. Why do I keep doing that? So we have Spirit Vulnerability on enemy upon deflecting a critical blow, which are going to be the red attacks. And this one, just the same. Now onto the accessories, we have... Oh, I keep doing this, dude. We have Spirit Fervor upon deflection, and then we have Power Gain upon deflection, and both of these 2 accessories, they have the status effect accumulation increased by 5.9%. This one, just the same. Alright, now for the Divine Beast, I'm using Tangxi, and the same thing that I was using in my last build, because we have increased spirit damage dealt to enemies afflicted with negative effects, increased by 5.1%. If you are below 10 morale, and if you are above 10, then the increase is going to be 10.2%. Then status effect accumulation on enemies increased by 7.2%. Wizardry spell damage, wouldn't care about that. And power drop to the target on wizardry spell hit, don't care about that one either. Now for stats, I have 64 points in Wood Virtue. You might want to have some more amount of points invested in Wood. Fire Virtue 37, just so we can get a good amount of spirit by attacking the enemies. Earth Virtue, wouldn't care about that, only 1 point, because we cannot lower it any further than 1. Metal Virtue 9, just so we can cast our Elemental Plague. And Water Virtue 39, because if you look at both my weapons, they have A scaling with Water Virtue. So having 39 points in wood, Water Virtue makes more sense, but normally I would put more points compared to wood into water, but because having a large HP pool makes it really, really easy to be super aggressive, and you don't have to be really careful with all the deflecting and stuff. So I have more points into wood compared to water, even though both my weapons scale mainly with Water Virtue. Okay, now we go to the special effects page. So as you can see, I have a spell duration increased by 5.7%. Then spell damage, spirit damage dealt to enemies increased by 29.4%, and that's going to be if you are below 10 morale. If you are above 10, then the increase is going to be 34.5%. Then enemy status effect accumulation increased by 37.4%, and this affects all 5 elements. Heaviness accumulation on enemies increased by 31.6, poison 31.9, negative effect duration on enemies increased by 14%, spirit gain from normal attack increased by 11.6, and we have power gain and spirit fervor upon deflection. Then we also have power drop on enemy upon wizardry spell. We don't benefit from this at all. And power drop upon fatal strike on enemy. And then we have spirit vulnerability on enemy on successfully deflecting a critical blow. And set bonus requirement mitigation. Now, how to use this build properly? Well, you're gonna be using your whatever weapon you have. Do not use the imbuement spells right off the bat. So use elemental plague, then hit the enemies with whatever weapon you have, and then you start using those imbuement spells, and then you just switch to the other weapon. So I'm pretty sure you know about this already, but I'm just going to throw it out there just for those of you who haven't spent a significant amount of time on this game. You know how poison reduces the flame resistance, and flame or burn reduces the chill resistance, then chill reduces the stone resistance, stone reduces lightning resistance, and lightning reduces poison resistance, and then poison again reduces the flame resistance. Now for a lot of bosses, they have complete immunity against a certain element, and then they have a really high resistance against a certain element. So take this guy for example. This guy has immunity against lightning and really high resistance against stone. So to get the most out of this build, what you're going to do is apply poison on him, and then after the poison accumulation is fully built up, then you hit them with a fire weapon, and then after they are inflicted by the scorch element, then you start hitting them with a chill weapon to build up the frost element, or whatever that's called, chilled element, right? So that's the way you are going to get the most out of this build. Now, you do not have to follow this for every single combat you're going to be in. You don't have to follow this at all. But just in case, if you want to get the most out of this build, that's the way you do it. Okay, so that's going to be the build. Give it a try. I think you're going to love it, because the thing that I really, really love about this build is that you do not have to, you don't have to switch your build to apply a specific status element on the enemy, because you have access to all 5 elements that you can use whenever you want. So I think this is a really, really fun build, and give it a try. I think you're gonna love it. And yeah, that's gonna be all for this video. Let me know if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one, and take care until then, and stay awesome. And I'm out. Peace.